Welcome, everybody. This is our sixth session of the 2026 version of our twice-monthly series of virtual Wednesday roundtables. With these, we hope to bring you the latest information on both clinical and non-clinical issues important to the equine veterinarian. Tonight's issue is very important. Our roundtable is entitled Reinventing Equine Emergency Care, Sustainable Coverage Models. Our panel of experts for this session are Doctors James Beckman, Ali Blasco, Jenna Donaldson, Megan Graves, and Katie Larson. And once we get started, I'll let them introduce themselves further. But first, that very quick bit of housekeeping. Remember to take advantage of the interactive nature of these roundtables. We really do want to hear from you, or at least we want to read your comments. The Q&A is for your questions. The chat feature is for doing just that, chatting. And then there's also that reaction button for your thumbs up and your smiley faces. Just a reminder that this session doesn't convey race-accredited CE, and a quick shout out to Kevin Hinchman, our IT man behind the curtain. But before we start tonight, we want to thank our sponsor for this session and for all of our virtual Wednesday roundtable sessions, American Regent Animal Health. And we are going to give sponsor representative Dr. Howland Mansfield a few moments to speak. Dr. Mansfield, when you're finished, if you would pass over the virtual mic to Dr. Graves, please.
Thank you, Karen. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for being here tonight. My name is Dr. Howland Mansfield, and I'm the Senior Manager of the Professional Services Veterinarians at American Regent Animal Health, makers of Adequan IM and BetaVet. I want to give a big thank you to all of you for attending tonight. It's great to see so many colleagues committed to continuing education in equine practice. Your dedication to caring for horses and supporting the people who love them is truly meaningful work. American Regent Animal Health is proud to be an educational partner of the American Association of Equine Practitioners for over 20 years, supporting educational programs that benefit the association, its members, and the horses you serve every day. We are excited to sponsor this evening's virtual roundtable session on reinventing equine emergency care, sustainable coverage models for modern practice with this esteemed panel. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedules to join us this evening. And if you'd like more information on American Regent Animal Health or our products, you can visit aranimalhealth.com. Without further ado, I'm pleased to turn it over to Dr. Megan Graves and this esteemed panel for tonight's roundtable.
Thank you. And thank you for your sponsorship so that we could be here tonight. Like they said, my name is Megan Graves. I have been doing emergency only for more than 20 years now and have owned my own emergency practice. And then currently I'm now at a university doing emergency only coverage for area practitioners. So everybody else take a chance to introduce themselves. James, do you want to go next?
Sure. I'm James Beckman. I wear many hats, but in this hat, my wife and I started Bluegrass Equine Emergency Service in 2020. It's a subscription-based standalone equine practice that just does emergencies nights and weekends. And it's for the local practitioners around the area. I think we service 6 counties here in the Louisville, Kentucky area.
Go ahead, Katie, you're next.
Okay. All right. Hi, my name is Katie Larson. I have an emergency-only subscription-based practice based out of West Newbury, Massachusetts. That is turning 2 years old in August. I can't believe how time flies. And yeah, that's me. Allison next.
Yeah, I'm Ali Blasco. My classmate and I formed Front Range Equine Urgent Care back in March of 2025. We are a non-subscription based practice, and we function from the hours of 5 a.m. to 10 p.m. every day. and are focusing on trying to keep practitioners in equine practice in some way, shape, or form. And hopefully through kind of our business model, we can do that.
And as a caveat, Allie is on call tonight.
Oh, thanks, Megan. I am on call tonight, so if I get a call and I have to jet out, I apologize.
But we're glad you're here for whatever moment we get you for. Jenna, what about you? Oh, and this is where it gets tricky, Jenna, because you're still muted.
There we go.
There you go.
I didn't hit the button hard enough, apparently. I'm Jenna. I'm in Ontario, Canada, near Toronto. My day job is as a partner at a typical full service equine. Well, I shouldn't say full service, like an ambulatory equine practice in the area. And then Trillium Equine is actually my side hustle that I launched 4 years ago as an after hours emergency mobile practice, similar to James's in a lot of ways, to provide some after hours relief and using a subscription model as well for the practitioners in my area.
Awesome. Thanks, Jenna. I'm going to get started with a question for Megan. Megan, you were practicing equine emergency only medicine long before it was recognized as a distinct model. First, after the birth of your child in the early 2000s, then founding one of the earliest emergency only practices in 2008, and now teaching and providing after hours relief at University of Tennessee. When you think back to those early days, what made you believe this would be a viable path with almost no one else doing it?
Yeah. I guess when I first started doing emergency only work, I'll be honest, I didn't think of it as like pioneering anything. I had a little one home like Jenna does now, and I loved equine practice, and I was just looking for a way to stay in the game without the lifestyle that traditional ambulatory work demanded. It was sort of a survival mechanism, not really a strategy, I guess, at the time. But what made me believe that it could actually work long term was what I saw in the field every day. Veterinarians were just exhausted. They were missing out on family events, and they were burning out, and they were carrying the weight of 24/7 responsibility because that's just how it always had been. And yet, clients still needed high quality emergency care. The horses certainly don't schedule their colics around our lives, or at least I tend to think it's job security because all colics seem to happen after hours. But I started to realize that maybe the problem wasn't actually the emergency work itself, but maybe it was more just the way we were structuring it. And so I started doing emergency only for the practice that I had been working at. And then when my husband's job moved us to another state is when I founded my ER only practice in 2008. And it was still very much an experiment, but the demand was instant. Practices were very relieved to have the help, and clients appreciated having someone who was fresh and focused. And I found that I could give better care when emergency medicine was my only job and not something that I tacked on at the end of an already long 12-hour day. So now, like kind of looking back, I can see that kind of the viability came from the simple truth that the need was always there. We just hadn't really built a system to meet it yet. And I just happened to be the one of the first people like desperate enough or maybe crazy enough or even stubborn enough to kind of try it. But I wouldn't say that I thought this is going to be a great idea, right away. But Katie, when you and I first talked about your launching of saltwater equine emergency services, I heard echoes of those same pressures that kind of pushed me to emergency only work 20 years ago, especially the need to just reduce that on-call burden for local veterinarians. What was the moment that you realized that your region needed a dedicated emergency only service, and how did you decide to build it the way that you did?
Sure, that's a great question. So I was finding that on-call was really a major pain point for many small practices in the area, similar to what Megan had described. And I was really itching to hang my own shingle and start my own practice. And as fate had it, my intern mate met you at AAP during the president's luncheon. And she said to me, I just met Megan Graves, and she told me about this really cool practice model. And I know that you really enjoy emergencies, and I think you should really do this. And so I dragged my feet for a while, but I was like, I really feel like my area and the surrounding area would be a good fit for this. And so that was kind of it took me a minute, but having the interest in emergency medicine, meeting you, learning about your practice was really the point. And then a mentor of mine kind of pushed me to really just go out and take a leap of faith. So it was great. The stars kind of aligned and I put myself out there. So that was good.
What
Awesome.
about anybody else in the group? Anybody want to share kind of what made you guys start your particular practices or when you recognized the need?
Oh, I'll answer this one. I actually went to one of the AAEP lead seminars and I had a great time. Katie was there too, I think,
Yeah.
actually
Oh,
that
yeah.
year. Yeah. And I left that seminar just being like very inspired that I wanted to try to do something to help improve the sustainability of the profession. And that's kind of what got me started on the path that launched Trillium.
Nice.
That's
I think
awesome.
the reason, well, I know the reason that we started ours is a little bit more on the negative aspect of it, and that we burned out an associate, and it was one of those deals where you stereotypically we look at it and you see this is going to happen, but up close to it, none of us saw that that associate was going to burn out, and she is a phenomenal veterinarian and was a phenomenal equine veterinarian. Probably won't ever get her back into equine practice. So that's when we decided we had to do something different in our neck of the woods up here because too many fantastic equine veterinarians were going to find something that fit their life a little bit better due to the demand of the on-call lifestyle.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that. And also to echo what everyone is saying, I think, as a general practitioner, having to work dawn to dusk, be on call, and then be expected to practice high quality standard of medicine the next day, is just, I mean, it might be feasible for some, but I think for a lot of us, as time goes on, we just can't do that. And so, watching people, you know, burn out and go into small animal and things like that is, something I think we need to address. And I think that these models are doing that.
Yeah, totally. I was at a call the other weekend and a client said to me, it was the middle of the night and I was giving fluids and the client was like, "Wow, you're in such a good mood." I'm like, "Well, I didn't work today." So it shows. But anyways, going back to James. Um James, Bluegrass Equine Emergency Services became a standalone after-hours practice in 2021, which can be a big shift for any established ambulatory group. What were the biggest challenges that you found, either culturally or logistically, in carving out emergency care as its own entity, and how did your team adapt to that?
Um, Great question. The biggest challenges were all inside in house. The clients and everybody else, they adapted to it great. There was a huge fear when we launched it because the way we launched it, we just basically told all of our clients through email and a letter that we were no longer doing emergency work, and this company was now doing all of our emergency work. And that caused a couple of phone calls, but most of the things that we got from clients were like, "That's great. Why didn't you do that 20 years ago?" So we all kind of felt like idiots because we're so worried about it. The biggest challenge we actually had was in-house changing the culture because for years, all of our veterinarians, and I'm sure none of you do this, and no one in this webinar does this, but all of us in our practice, we worked very hard at not seeing emergencies We worked very hard at triaging things over the phone and figuring out with pictures and things like that if that cut really needed to be seen or if that cellulitis could wait till tomorrow, things like that. So we had to have a huge culture shift in our practice. And with that, all of the subscribing practices are starting to have that culture shift as well. And that, you know, we're driven more towards a service modality, and that we are, if someone calls, we go. And it doesn't matter how small the cut is or how minor the colic is. If someone is wanting their horse seen, we go. And that was a huge culture change for our area, because, you know, for eons, equine veterinarians in our area worked real hard to not go see the things they didn't have to go see because everybody had worked all day and they wanted the night off. So that was probably our biggest culture shift. The logistics stuff really wasn't that big of a deal. Our office staff is phenomenal, and they picked that right up once we had the mechanisms in place to switch over emergency stuff and to work on that, because our standalone practice is technically a subsidiary of our daytime practice, and so we utilize the same office staff. And so once we had all of those duties and everything figured out, that was a piece of cake. So our biggest issue was the logistical aspect, or the cultural aspect of it, both with us and with our clients, that kind of thing. So anybody else have any huge cultural changes that had to happen for that to work in their practices?
I think you brought up a really good point, James, and it's like important for me to think about too when I add subscribing practices. You kind of have to find out and talk to the practice and see what the culture is like and figure out like what your anticipated caseload is, because if their clients are trained to treat, do everything on their own and they don't actually go see any calls, there may be a mismatch there. So I think that's a really good point that you bring up in terms of like going to see a call or working it out over the phone or someone giving Banamine or not for a colic. I think that's always a good point and something to think about for sure.
Can I gently break in with a question for Dr. Beckman?
Yes, ma'am.
So the question is, for James, is your ER practice a co-op or a standalone business? How many DVMs cover the ER aspect? Are they compensated the same as a general practitioner, daytime practitioner?
Those are all very good questions. So the way we have ours set up, like I said, it's technically a subsidiary of our daytime practice, Gaslight Equine. That's just so that we can pool our accounting and office staff and things like that. It makes life a whole lot easier when you're talking about inventory and that kind of thing. So technically it is part of our daytime practice, but it operates completely autonomous from it. As far as compensation for our veterinarians, we pay all of our veterinarians salary, and they get a salary plus a commission. But we make sure that our emergency veterinarian is paid a salary that is commensurate with any of our associate veterinarians in the daytime practice. That is one of the tenets of our practice, is because they're working hard. They're just working different. They don't see as many clients as our daytime practice. They don't generate as much revenue as our daytime practice, but they are still working hard, so they still get paid as an associate. Currently, we've actually got a really good gig right now. We've got one veterinarian that she does, we divide it up as shifts. She does 5 shifts, and there's 7 shifts in a 7-day week. So she does 5 shifts, and then one of the other veterinarians in the daytime practice and we cover the other 2 shifts. So I'm on call one night a week, and one of our other veterinarians is on call 1 night a week. And since both of us have enough gray hair that we were on call a lot of nights a week for a long time, this 1 night a week thing for the last 6 years has been pretty phenomenal. We did have 2 veterinarians at one point, and we may grow that up to, 2 emergency vets again. The problem with that is there's, you're basically running 3.5 shifts a week. And so paying 2 full-time veterinarians for 3.5 shifts a week gets problematic as far as the accounting goes. But what we've got now is a sweet gig, sweet deal for us. But we have done it with 2 veterinarians, and it was doable financially to do it with 2 veterinarians working, both of them working, part time, 3.5 days a week. And what was the other question on it?
How many DVMs cover the ER? And I think you answered that. 3.
It's 3, 1 shift for each of the other 2, but the other one, the lion's share of the work is done by 1 veterinarian, Dr. Custer. She's a rock star.
Cool. Okay, thank you. I will leave it to you again.
Okay. Jenna, Trillium Equine launched a subscription-based after-hours model in 2022 to improve work-life balance of the equine practitioners in Southern Ontario. You had worked in ambulatory practice prior to that, and so can you talk about kind of how your ambulatory practice prior to starting Trillium and currently in Trillium, how that helped the way you design Trillium, their structure, their pricing, coverage model, things like that? Oh, Jenna,
Yes.
Are you there? There you are.
Yeah, I'm here. And yes, I'm happy to answer that. And Karen, I just wanted to point out, I was typing answers to a couple of the questions while I was listening to the others speak, and I realized it makes them disappear. So
that's correct. They don't actually disappear. They move to the answered queue, but then no one who listens to this on demand will be able to see your answers. So if you wouldn't mind just quickly going over those questions and responses at some point, I would be grateful.
For sure. Yeah, absolutely. For those of you who are here, there was one question about getting this kicked off in academia. And I did a podcast a couple of years ago with Dr. Fogley from NCSU, and that's exactly what she did. And she talks a lot about that in that podcast. So I found the link to the podcast and put it in the answer to that question. So if anyone's interested in academia, and Megan has lots to say about this as well, of course. So back to James's question. I worked in ambulatory practice for several years before I came up with the idea of starting Trillium Equine. And I think when we met yesterday to kind of like have like a pre-talk before this panel discussion, we all talked about how it's really important to have some degree of comfort level with emergencies before embarking into this type of practice, or otherwise having really solid mentorship, because the communication can be trickier if you're constantly seeing clients that you don't know. It adds another, just like an extra layer of complication to things. So having a solid basis in ambulatory practice is very helpful in my opinion. So that was the starting point. Then for me, I worked in several different geographical areas in equine ambulatory practice. So getting to know each area and what the needs are in the area, it was a very important step for me. And then back in Ontario, which is where I grew up and where I was from originally, I knew a lot of the other vets in the area. And so I spent a lot of time speaking with them about what their needs were and what their pain points were, like Katie was talking about with equine practice, and sort of like what the resources were in the area and where we could start from. There was a few different on-call groups. So I talked to them about some of their challenges and what would it take for them to want to do something different and that type of thing. It was interesting to me talking to different practitioners at different points in their career. Can you turn that back on? Thanks. At different points in their career. So there was some that were towards the end of their career, they were wanting to retire. And so for them, giving the after hours emergencies to a different practice made complete sense, because they were happy to have the time to rest and engage in other hobbies and that type of thing. And then there was some people with young families. And so having the extra flexibility to do things with their young kids was really helpful. Then other practitioners on the flip side, there was a lot of recent grads who were keen to pay off student loans and to have a little bit more income. And so they were the first pool that I drew on in terms of finding vets to work for Trillium and to cover shifts. And so they were happy to do extra emergencies and have some extra income as well. So that was probably the main thing for figuring out what was available and what the needs were in my area, was how it helped me to shape the model. Then the structure, James was super helpful, actually. I spent quite a lot of time speaking with him about how he set up Bluegrass Equine, and it's just a fantastic model that's worked really well. And Trillium's a little bit different in some ways, just based on the different area, but James was so generous with his time and with his insight for me in giving me some ideas as a starting point. And then the pricing has really shifted over time, as I got to know, again, more into what worked and what didn't. And we can talk about that probably a little bit more later. I think there's some more specific questions about that type of thing as well. So I'll turn.
Jen,
oh, sorry. Go
I
ahead.
think you brought up, I want to make a point. I think you brought up a good point that I have seen. One of the more gratifying things I've seen in our area is that we've got 3 veterinarians that I can think of that utilize our service to varying degrees, that are all at the end of their career. And basically, we're buying them extra years in equine practice because they are to the point where they can't do emergencies all night and still get up and work all day. And so we're extending their practice life by years, doing this, taking the emergencies off of them. And I think that's been have you seen that as well? To me, that's been very gratifying.
Yeah, 100%. The same for me. It was on a personal note, I got some really nice feedback from some of them. One had like a big personal loss, and she said that the coverage that Trillium provided really gave her time to rest and recover from all of that. So that was really nice as well. Yeah, I completely agree. It wasn't something that I was anticipating. I thought it would be more attractive to people earlier in careers and with young kids and that, but it's actually probably even more attractive to the people at the end of their career. I will get back to Allison. Front Range Equine Urgent Care was created to address burnout and the equine vet shortage in northern Colorado, and you're offering urgent and emergency only care. What trends or pain points in your region convinced you that an urgent care model was the right solution, and how has your community responded?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. And I think one of the trends was me. I had a GP practice here, and I actually detoured for a little bit into small animal and realized that was not for me. But we had also kind of seen that vets were, either retiring, getting injured, and being out for a while, or mostly, younger practitioners that were leaving and going into small animal, just because work-life balance, salary, everything, for what was expected of them was just not sustainable. And so I think that was really kind of the main thing to kind of drive the urgent care model, was sustainability and, trying to keep these docs in some way in equine practice. We all know the statistics are very sad for us. We are a dying breed. And so I think that one, starting with the docs that we hired, was, just kind of why we were doing this. Myself, I came from I had practiced equine for 10 years, and just needed a break. I was burned out, so I did small animal, and that was terrible. So here I am, very happy now. Our other practitioner that helped, get things off the ground, she's a general practitioner in the area, a little bit north. And then one of the other docs, she was full-time small animal and had done equine and was burned out, and this has allowed her to get back in. And then our independent contractor that we have also was burned out at an equine practice, and now, she's happily doing, a few shifts a month for us, and then also working at another practice. So just kind of getting that avenue back for those doctors was really important and just kind of let us know that was what, from a sustainability standpoint, that's what we needed to do. I think that the community has responded very well. Prior to launching, we did have kind of a meet and greet for the local practitioners to come meet the team, ask questions, you know, get their concerns out there. And I think the two main points that they were concerned about was trust, which is very understandable. I think that we all want to take care of our clients and our patients, and you know, ego aside, like I think we all think we do that very well for our clients and patients, and that it's really hard for someone else to provide that same level of care and empathy and understanding. And so we try our best to, triage the situation, and then refer it back to the practitioner as soon as we can, or as soon as they want us to. Sometimes they will prefer that we kind of follow up and do everything and then hand the horse back over when it's, happy and healthy again. And other, docs are just grateful to be able to, sleep that night, and they'll follow up with the horse in the morning. And so I think kind of trying to ensure that we are going to be there for their clients regardless. Like Dr. Beckman said, if someone calls and they're in our call area, we go. We don't say, give a tube of Banamine and call your RDVM in the morning. As long as they want us to come out, we will go out. I think also one of the pain points and one of the concerns was because we are open 5 a.m. to 10 p.m., there is a lapse in coverage between 10 p.m. and 5 a.m. And practitioners were a little bit concerned about what they were supposed to do in that time frame. We did keep track of statistics, phone calls, all the things, for the first year, and then some. For sticklers out there that say we need to be available 24/7, we had 3.6% of our phone calls came in between 10 p.m. and 5 a.m. And about 60%, I believe, last year was between 9 a.m. and 5 p.m., and that's up to 75% now. And so I think that is also showing that we are, one, training our clients, and two, that our practice is doing what we wanted to do, which is kind of relieve the emergency and urgent care burden from the daytime practitioners so they can just go along with their day, and we can triage and see ERs for them, and then it doesn't mess up their schedule.
Ali, I love that you just brought up kind of that window of time when the emergencies occur. I wish I had this paper handy, but maybe Karen is on it. But I actually published a paper that talked about the large animal caseload for field-based stuff. And after midnight, it was also less than 3%. And so, a lot of times people say, when do you sleep? If you're emergency only or whatever. And I really feel like, although I probably am one of those people that doesn't require as much sleep as others, very few of my calls are going to happen after midnight. Now, I might get one at 11 and be out after midnight, but
Right.
I think statistically, if somebody was sitting there thinking, I'd love to do emergency work, but I don't want the 3 a.m. colic, those are really, really rare. And so
Exactly.
You bring up a good point that those are uncommon. They feel really common when you're the person that's worked all day and then you have to be on call. But in reality, they're actually pretty infrequent.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. And similarly, if we get a call at 10 p.m., we are going. And so you might be there, working past midnight, 1 a.m. But I will also say, kind of the percentage of calls also that were from like 5 a.m. to 9 p.m. Were definitely not as frequent. So me personally, I just wake up at a normal time and have my coffee, and sometimes I get called at 5 a.m. and wakes me out of my stupor, but it doesn't happen as often as people think it does, I think. And so it's kind of nice to put it out there that yes, you're on call for a good chunk of time, but statistically, this is when you're going to get calls, and it's not as terrible as it sounds.
Yeah.
Does anyone else have anything to contribute to that?
I would like to second that. And we were kind of worried about that. I had talked to you, Megan, about those numbers that you had run at UT. We do a fair amount of repro work in this area outside Louisville. And I was concerned because it felt like I had a lot of middle of the night foalings that I had to deal with prior to starting the practice. But really and truly, the vast majority of our dystocias, the vast majority of our assisted foalings, they happen before midnight. I know it feels like we're out there late, but really and truly, even the foalings, most of them in our area happen before midnight.
Yeah. Jenna, I think you might have next. Oh, well, it might be me. Are you muted? Maybe you're muted and you're talking and I don't know it.
Sorry, I got confused there. Megan, you've watched this field evolve from a time when emergency only practice was almost unheard of to now seeing multiple regions adopt it. What changes in the profession, cultural, economic, or generational, do you think have made this model finally take hold?
Yeah, I think, when I first started doing emergency only work, the idea really didn't fit into the profession's kind of mental model. Equine vets were sort of supposed to do everything, wellness, lameness, dentistry, emergency, and be able to do it all the time. And so for a long time, the barrier, like James said, it wasn't the logistics, it was definitely more of a culture. But I think what's changed is that the profession has finally started listening to what veterinarians have been saying quietly, but saying for years, and that is that old model is just not sustainable. I mean, culturally, we've become more honest about burnout, about our family needs, about the fact that loving this work doesn't mean sacrificing our entire rest of our lives to it, and that shift alone opened doors for new structures like we've all started here. I think economically, too, practices began to feel the strain of trying to provide 24/7 coverage when they have a shrinking staff. And so when when you might have just 2 or 3 doctors, it's difficult being on call, every night. And emergency only services became less of a luxury and more of a necessity to keep practices functioning. I think from a generational standpoint, the new wave of veterinarians is different and different in the best way possible. Like they really value collaboration and they're very comfortable with shared coverage and teletriage and team-based care, and they're not afraid to say that there really needs to be a better way, and then they actually go out and build it. And so I don't really think that emergency only practice took hold because the idea changed. I think that the profession has changed, and we finally reached a point where people were ready to accept that innovation wasn't a threat to tradition and that it was the only way to kind of preserve the parts of equine medicine that we all love. And so I think that's kind of where I've seen lots of different shifts along the way, and in a good way. I think sometimes And I love, now that I'm at a veterinary school, I get lots of interaction with our students and kind of encouraging our students that equine practice is maybe not like these rumors you've heard, and kind of put a positive spin on maybe some negative things that they've heard in the past. And I love to be able to give them ideas of how things are looking different, things are changing. You can find these practices that are working on innovative methods. So that's kind of what I've seen. Anybody else have comments as far as what they've seen? Guys make me feel old if I'm the only one that talks about the change over time. Okay, let's dive into the business side of things. I do think we touched on some of that a little bit, and James kind of brought it up. So James, going back, Allie kind of pointed this out as well. These emergency coverage models like ours, they really rely heavily on trust from the referring veterinarians or these subscribing veterinarians who are going to hand over their after hours coverage. And so what systems or kind of communication habits have been most important in maintaining that trust and kind of keeping those relationships strong?
So probably the biggest thing is the communication with the practice. We have ours set up so that every morning by 8:30 in the morning, if we get a patient from their practice from the subscribing veterinarians, if the subscribing veterinarian sends us something, or oftentimes it's just on their voicemail, call the emergency line, and we take care of it. But by 8:30 they have a full report with all of the lab work and everything, and so they have, when they start their day, they know what has happened overnight. I think that has been a huge thing, that it's handed back to them the next day, or the next business day. We'll keep them through the weekend, but we hand them back to them through the next business day. A couple of other things is, when we first bring on a new subscriber, we do a lot of onboarding and talking with them and kind of holding their hand through the process, so that, that's because it's a scary thing to turn over all of your clients for all of when they're in need. You don't call me anymore, you call the emergency vet. It's a scary thing for somebody that's been doing it for a lot of years. But we kind of hold their hand through that and work with them. And if there's any questions or anything, we work through that. But honestly, the biggest thing is when I prove to them that they can make more money by letting me do their emergencies, because the next day they're a whole lot more energized. Every practice that we have gone back and checked with them on, their gross sales have increased for their doctors that following letting us do their emergencies. And it's because they can get more stuff in during the day. And it's because they do more work during the day. Like, those exams that maybe they were cutting short because they only got 2 hours of sleep the night before. Maybe they didn't do some stuff that they could have done because they were exhausted, all of those things. So we proved to them that they're making more money and practicing better veterinary medicine by letting us take over their emergencies. That has gone a huge, that's been a huge thing for us to try and get them to stay on board.
Yeah, I actually love the follow-up communication that comes. I do a lot of it through text messages, like the following morning or whatever. And, I love that I know that they went to their kid's graduation, or, I know what's going on in their life. They were able to attend their daughter's lacrosse game or whatever that is in that life event. And so it sort of builds community. I love talking to you the other day, Jenna, about kind of that community that you guys have built there in Canada. Do you want to talk about that at all?
Oh yeah, sure. We were chatting about how we had a dinner last year that one of the drug companies sponsored for us, and all of the vets that work for Trillium that cover shifts, and then all of the practice owners came, and it was a really nice evening to get to know each other and like have some FaceTime. And we asked everyone to send a picture from their most memorable emergency case, and we got some crazy stories. It was really fun. So it's been kind of cool. Yeah.
Yeah,
really
I
neat
love
way.
that community for sure.
That's awesome. I love everything that James said. And for me, I really enjoy working with other practices and other people and collaborating. And if there's ever a weird situation with a client, I like being able to connect with them and be like, wait a second, what's going on here? And I feel like they support me and have my back, which is awesome. I really enjoy that. The other thing I was going to say is I have a similar process to James where I make sure the notes are there the next day by like 10 a.m. And if I ship a horse or euthanize a horse, I'm usually texting them and letting them know. And I will say I'm not afraid. Like if a client wants me to call their regular vet and talk to them, as long as it's not 1 in the morning, I have no shame. And I feel like they like that. It doesn't happen often, but there's certain situations. And like I said, I have no shame. So I think it's good.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I would agree with that.
yeah, the like we were talking about the trust component, like we try and get our records over as soon as possible. We have it kind of like in a 12-hour time frame, but usually we get them to the client as well as the referring vet in like hours, kind of depending on our caseload throughout the day. And then um we will, if we just like saw like basic colic, like it's just a quick email, like, hey, we saw so and so, let us know if you need anything. But I also am, do my best to at least vets that, we work relatively close with. I'll text them and give them a heads up and be like, hey, I saw so and so, and then also letting the client know, oh yeah, like I will send these records to your primary. I will, shoot them a text and let them know, what's going on, I think goes a long way in building that trust between the client, the urgent care or ER model, as well as the referring veterinarian.
I think that's a good point Dr. Blasco makes about letting the client know that you're referring that back to the primary. I think it does two things. One, it lets them know they're not left in a lurch. Lets them know that there's somebody that is still following that case. And two, when we first started, I had some clients that almost felt like they were cheating on their veterinarian by having us do their emergency work. And the fact that we told them up front, we are going to send all of this information back to Dr. Such and Such by tomorrow morning, and they will follow up with you going from there. I think that kind of relieves that anxiety of, you've been my vet for 20 years and here I am cheating on you at 10 o'clock at night with another veterinarian. It kind of relieves that. And then they all feel better about that communication.
Yeah, I also think speaking like, cheating on your veterinarian, I think sometimes the vet side of things, this type of model, we can't steal clients or anything like that. And we make sure that the RDVM kind of dictates how the follow-up happens. Like even if the client's like, oh my gosh, you were great. Can you come out tomorrow and recheck or, whatever, we're like, that's great that, you had such a great experience. Like that's what we want. But, I'm going to send your record to Dr. So and so. And if they don't have time tomorrow or whenever, or, they would prefer us to follow up, we definitely can. But we're going to let, Dr. So and so make that call. So trying to always, put the primary doc first in kind of the medical decisions as well as the financial decisions too for the horse, I think goes a long way in kind of these models so they don't feel like you're stealing business.
Yeah.
Katie, on the business aspect of it, can you talk about Saltwater Equine? You guys use a streamlined, emergency focused workflow. You guys do payment at time of service. You guys do all the details back to the primary vet quickly. Can you kind of go over that a little bit, and how have your clients and you're referring veterinarians. How is everybody reacting to that and dealing with that kind of a structure and that's streamlined structure that you guys are using?
Sure. So everyone's responded really well in terms of the practices that I work for as well as their clients. The clients in general are very happy that their vet has time off. Um, I will say from the beginning, I said I'm gonna get payment time of at time of service, and for the first couple months, I wasn't as good at it. But then I just worked it into every single conversation, and I got Venmo, and I have like any way you could possibly pay me. So my AR is 0, humble brag. Um, so it's as long as I have the conversation, I mean, on the phone, I can get payment. And I do work for some veterinarians who, if I am unable to get payment, they will either A, help me chase down the client, or B, they will pay the bill and then they will get payment from that client. So that's kind of nice to have that type of support. I really, really like that. So that's been good and well received and everything. And in terms of how to calculate subscription fees and everything, it's a little bit complicated, and I would recommend that people look back at our Megan and I's presentation from AAP or the paper that we wrote, because that will be a little bit more helpful than this. But basically, how I determine my subscription fees is I look at my monthly costs, and I figure out how many practices that I'm covering for, and how much profit I want to make without seeing. I just look at it at a baseline. Say I saw 0 emergencies, which is highly unlikely, but that's kind of a starting point for me. And then it's always good to talk to the practitioners about, oh, how many emergencies do you see a month? And honestly, they can get that from their software, even if they are not sure that they can. It's something they can get. So that's kind of helpful, and it's a little bit challenging to just explain on a webinar. So I'd recommend that you look back at that, and it's very individual situation, but that's how I calculated it, and that's how Megan kind of gave me the idea. So that's a long-winded answer to that. Anyone else have any other thoughts on that?
I do want to, I think you brought up a really good point of getting paid at time of service. I think we all are aware that emergencies are when we typically don't always get paid. And so for our practice, we actually require a credit card to have, and we run it for the call fee prior to leaving, and we save it. We send them over a client consent form that has kind of like our financial policy that they sign, and it's either pay at time of service or pay within 48 hours. And, if you don't pay by 48 hours, your credit card is run for the remaining balance. And so, yes, also humble brag, our AR is 0 too. And I also think like, not that we want to be, weeding out emergencies, but it is a good kind of way to be like, this is the cost for it. This is the approximate cost for the workup, and payment is due at time of service. Is that okay with you? And then plug for the AEP Foundation of the Horse too. I think that their little small grant that we can use can definitely be helpful in those situations where you want to still help the horse and help the owner, and it just finances are an issue. And I think that also comes down to communication with the client as well. But yeah, we require all the things.
Yeah, that's a good plug for that grant. Everyone should be set up for that because that's a great thing to have in your back pocket. I have that because it's helped me on more than one occasion, and always an option, like you said, when you want to help the horse and they
Yeah.
can. All right. Anyone else have thoughts on that? All right. Moving on to Jenna. Subscription-based after hours is still relatively new in equine medicine. What have you learned about sustainability, pricing, and practice expectations since launching Trillium?
That's a great question. And thanks, Katie. It kind of leads into, it kind of like links back to what you were just talking about. So I thought I'd wait for the question to answer. The subscription-based model is definitely really new, and that is something that I had some pushback on from practice owners. And I learned quickly to have really good boundaries and get better at saying no for practitioners who were like, well, can you just cover like this night for me or this weekend for me or whatever. And explaining like the purpose of the subscription model and how that goes to in my case, I use it, the subscription fees are what pays the vets to be on call and to be available. And I certainly have been flexible in sometimes, or maybe like offered like a discount for someone who wanted to try it out here and there. But overall, it's like, nope, if you want to be part of this, the subscription model is really important. It's not fair to the other vets that are paying the subscription fee if you're not paying it. So that's the way I looked at it. And then in terms of payment at time of service, so Trillium Equine actually invoices the client's regular practice. We don't invoice clients directly. It makes sense in my geographical area. There's a lot of practice loyalty, and most clients like are very like have a really good regular relationship with their vet. So it works out pretty well that way. And then I have a really awesome answering service, and I have a huge plug for Animal Health Link. If any of you aren't familiar with it, I strongly suggest looking them up because they're absolutely fantastic. It's RVTs who answer the phone, and they are really good. They provide estimates for our clients, or for like the clients calling in, and they actually ask who the regular veterinarian is. And people call in and they say, oh, I don't have a regular veterinarian, or they say they have a vet who's not. They have like a list of the practices that are members. And if someone calls in and says that they aren't a client of one of those practices, they say, sorry, this is like Trillium only provides after hours care for people from that practice. Sometimes they'll contact the after hours vet, and I've had a couple situations where they've taken a credit card number from them and gone to see it, but it's in our area, it's pretty rare. Most people have a established relationship with a vet in the area. So that works out pretty well.
Jenna, is Animal Health Link available in the US or is it only Canada?
It's in the US as well. Yeah,
Okay.
it's Canadian based, but they do,
Okay.
I'm 99.9% sure they work in the US. Yeah. It's expensive compared to other answering service options for sure. Like it's a lot more expensive, but the level of service that you're getting for it is a lot. It's like next level. Like it's like unbelievably helpful. And yeah, I encourage people to check them out if you're interested. Someone was asking the name of it's Animal Health Link. I just typed it into the chat. And then in terms of the client communication, I echo a lot of what's been said in communication with the regular veterinarians. And I haven't had too many issues with people someone asked the question, are clients, you just rely on clients being honest? I asked the practice owners help with this to some extent because they're going to be on the hook for the bill. So I've had some situations where they see someone, they're all set up differently how they have their clients get a hold of the answering service. So some of them will have they have the number for the answering service on their voicemail. And I've had a couple times where they see who's calling them and they're like, oh no, like I do not want to be on the hook for that. And so they'll call me and be like, so and so just called. Like if they call the answering service, like we are not going to them. So that's really helpful. And then other veterinarians do like actively triage things, and then they just have the clients call if an emergency needs to be seen. And I am happy for them to use the membership however works for them and however makes their life better. So if they want to do half their emergencies or some of them and they just use Trillium when they're not available, that's like totally up to them. I'm totally fine with it. And so that it works out pretty well.
I just have a comment which might be different from everyone else on the panel. So my number is like not out there. It's not on my website. You can't find it. And that's intentional. And so people get my number, but I'm very, very clear the entire time, and my business cards don't have my number on it. And it's really not been an issue for me. Sometimes it depends on the vet and the situation. Sometimes I'll have my number if they don't have a service and the clients will call me, but I'm super, super clear. You're going back to your regular vet. This is the plan, and it's really been no issue. So, anyways, just a side note.
Yeah, I Trillium is the same. The member practice owners have it and they can give it out to their clients, but they don't have people post it in their barns, that sort of thing. And it's not on the website, it's not distributed at all. So, and I agree, Katie, I have very few people that get a hold of it that shouldn't. Anybody
So-
else with any thoughts? Oh, James, sorry, you're jumping in.
One of the things, so we're set up a little bit different, and that we have subscription based. We will take clients of non-subscribing veterinarians. They move to the bottom of the queue. Their veterinarians don't get the perks, all of those things, and their clients get charged a large fee because they're not members. So that, and that's how it works out. And when sometimes the non-subscribing veterinarians will call and ask about it, and we explain to them the difference in the fees, and that kind of thing. But we do take clients that are not subscribing veterinarians clients. And we just, that way we can cover everything and we don't have to be picking and choosing, because I worried about that. And I'm glad that your veterinarians at Trillium can have that communication, because that scared me to death, that I was going to start trying to chase people for money, or have, putting it on somebody else's bill, putting on, the referring vet's bill, and they're like, hey, I don't know that person, or, that person has been bad debt for 5 years. So that's awesome that's the way you guys are managing that. I think that's a great system you have there.
Yeah, it's worked pretty well. I've a couple of times helped practice owners chase people down because I'm kind of determined about that sort of thing. But it's like few and far between, to be honest. Allison, your call area spans multiple cities and requires rapid response from early morning through late evening. What logistical strategies with staffing, routing, communication have helped you maintain reliability and avoid burnout?
Okay. I think at least right now, yeah, our call area is up to 50 minutes kind of from our central location. And kind of it's area dependent, at least where we're based. I feel like kind of southwesty things typically have more that's available for coverage. As you get further east and kind of north in our area, that's when veterinarians are not always as available. And so I think even though, we'll be driving like 50 minutes sometimes kind of to the northeast part of where we serve, oftentimes, we'll get kind of like a cluster of emergencies. So we're kind of spending our time there as opposed to ping-ponging all over the place. I think that setting client expectations with, okay, I'm here, I'm finishing up at this location, and, it's going to take me blank amount of minutes to get to you, is something that needs to happen just so they can, make decisions if they would like to try and find someone that's closer. As far as a staffing standpoint, right now it is one part-time DVM, and then independent contractor. She does a few shifts a month, as well as myself. So right now I'm doing the majority of the work. We're currently looking to hire someone, shameless plug, for full-time work if you're interested in the Front Range area of Colorado. But I think like from a kind of just avoiding burnout standpoint, I don't know if this is really like a logistical thing, but we try to have realistic expectations also for being on call for a shift, which is, 17 hours. As long as you are, you know, close to kind of our main central area or where the truck is, and we define close as 20 to 30 minutes, and you can get to emergency in a, decent amount of time. And I would say probably like the calculated time plus maybe 15 to 20 minutes. I think that keeps us happy as veterinarians because being on call for that long of a period of time, you can't just sit at home and wait for the phone to ring. I think that the culture that we've kind of created for our vets is, you can go for a run, you can go for a hike, you can go ride your horse. I am always trying to ride my horse, and squeeze some barn time in, and feel kind of like a normal human for those times when you're on call because, you can't live in a constant state of, oh my gosh, when is the phone going to ring? Because sometimes it doesn't. And then you've just spent the whole day being stressed and nervous about being on call and the phone didn't ring. So I think trying to kind of have that type of culture at a practice is really important, at least for kind of our model that we have. We also just have like a text thread. We share Google Calendar so we can all just kind of, pick the shifts that, work best for our schedule. We meet up, once or twice a month to just kind of hang out, chat, talk about cases, talk about life outside of vet med, and just try and keep that positive culture of yes, you're on call for a chunk of time, but you can still be normal.
Yeah, one of the audience questions was about if you were trying to set up like a 2-doctor emergency practice, how would you go about, well, first of all, like how far in advance do you send out your schedule? And maybe this is a good question for Katie, since you're kind of doing it on your own. How far in advance do you send out your schedule to subscribing practitioners? And then if you were to add in an associate, so it would be, 2 people to kind of cover all the times, what would that look like if you both wanted to be out of town at the same time, for whatever reason?
Is that a question for me? I'm sorry.
I think you're probably the best person to answer
Okay.
it. Yeah.
Well, in terms of, and tell me if I'm not answering this right, or what you wanted as a response. In terms of my schedule, typically I'm sending it out months in advance. That being said, I do have some people, especially solo practitioners, where things come up more last minute, and I can often accommodate it, but not always. But typically, I have an idea of what my schedule looks like. It's really just weekends for me because I like to travel and like to just do stuff all the time. I would say typically like 6 months in advance, but that's not always the case. And I typically, my weekday coverage typically stays consistent. Not always. Summer is variable, but it tends to be consistent. So yeah, I usually know what it is.
Yeah, and I think like to the point of if there were going to be 2 of you and you both were going to be gone at the same time, I think it just comes back to communication, right? Like, these practitioners that you're going to cover for, they're understanding what if both people want to go to the annual
Yeah.
convention and you're not going to be around or whatever. And so, the same as when I'm on call, when I'm not on call, all those practices cover their own emergencies. And so the same would be true if you had 2 people and you happen to both take vacation at the same time or something like that. I think, we talked about trust with your referring veterinarians and just kind of building those relationships. And that's kind of where all of this would stem from anyway.
And I'm not taking like, I know some of you guys have a practice that's modeled where you take all the coverage. I just take some of the coverage. So normally it's easy to work out because they're not depending on me to take all of their coverage. So yeah.
Yeah, same for me, Katie. I send out my availability of when I can cover for them, and it does change, month to month. But I try to get it out several months in advance, as best I can, and kind of targeting. Obviously, it's a relief service, so trying to target those, weekends when you can offer more relief. I was just on for the holiday weekend, things like that, but trying to get it out in advance. But then again, I'm not available. This isn't, a primary practice that's going to be available 24/7 either. So, having some flexibility in that. Kind of still along the business side of things.
Hey,
What do you
Megan.
guys? Yeah, yeah.
I think that's a good point to those of the people that are in this webinar or listening to this webinar that are interested in starting up something and trying to figure out exactly how to do it and what they want it to look like. There's no one size fits all for this type of a service. There are people on this group that have, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, guaranteed coverage. And there are people on this group that have, nights and weekends as it fits into their schedule coverage and everything in between.
Yep.
And I think, that's a powerful thing for people starting it up to know that you can do this however fits your schedule and however fits your lifestyle, what you're looking for. I think everybody on this webinar has figured out a way to make it work with, the different schedules, the different things they see. So I think that's a good point that people starting it up need to understand. There are many ways to do this that you can make it profitable, as well as helping out veterinarians, as well as making it fit into your lifestyle.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks, James. So thanks for stressing that for sure. Kind of along those same lines of like, if you were going to set up one of these practices, what would you all say in terms of equipment is sort of the most difficult piece of equipment to justify purchasing for your needs?
Oh, I'll start with this one. So in my area, I think just like James was saying, there's no one size fits all, and each geographical area is very different. So my answer is probably not going to work for a lot of other areas. But that said, in my area, referral to like all the referral hospitals in our area do referral only. They don't do, no one does both primary care and referral. But the referral hospitals in our area, it's like pretty close, pretty easy. It's like pretty low stress. And it's like a fairly wealthy area, to be honest. And most of the horses would have referral options if they're not doing well on the farm, for example, for a colic or for a major laceration or that type of thing. So in our hands, the DR and the ultrasound, some of the vets will have it on their trucks, but some of them don't. And it has not been a struggle. If there was a case like a street nail, probably honestly is the one like major case I would say. I've said to the vets that don't have easy access to a DR, like just call me and I'll meet you and I'll bring you my x-ray and we can do it. It's no problem. But there's been in 4 years, one street nail once. So it's not enough. The cases are not enough to justify that massive purchase for me. I've thought about it. I've looked into it. I found cheap options, whatever, but it just logistically was a nightmare for people to share it. And so for me, I would rather just have to deal with like the one-off case where someone really needs something rather than trying to put that expense. So some of the vets really have like a pretty basic setup. They have like tubes, stuff to do, a colic, stuff to do, basic lacerations. They have stuff to tap a joint, to stitch up wounds, and yeah, and like see eyes and honestly, it works really, really well. So it's not hugely expensive to outfit that vehicle. Like I've done it now 3 or 4 times, and it costs about $4,000 to get them everything they need.
Yeah, in the back of that toolkit is kind of a little inventory list that somebody could use as a little spin-off. And yeah, it's not very much. And you can keep your overhead really low too. And if you keep your overhead low, you just reorder the drugs that the night you get back of what you've used or whatever. And so that helps profitability too.
Yeah, totally. And I take the drugs, I have them keep track of the short dated drugs, and I take them and cycle them through my daytime practice.
Nice.
That's
Anybody
awesome.
else?
I was gonna echo Jenna. The DR is a big thing for me. It's gonna take me forever to pay off, but I did buy a used one. I feel like I'm in a situation where I have to have it, but I don't really use it. So I would advise people if you have a situation when you could share, it would be better. But I did get an awesome deal on it that I don't think I ever could have found. And so it worked out for me, but I never use it. It's like, it kills me. I gotta like recalibrate it every so often. But yeah, that's a big thing for me. The ultrasound I use all the time. I just got a V-Scan Air, which has abdominal and tendon probe for like 5 grand, and it's gonna pay for itself pretty easily. So yeah, lots of colics.
Yeah, we have the Vscan Air, and I love it for what we use it for, like abdomens and chests and wounds and stuff. It's great. So
What do we want to talk about
oh,
next?
right. Katie, kind of along the same lines that we're talking about, what is your strategy in terms of maintaining inventory, in a standalone practice?
So inventory is definitely a challenge. It's kind of like a game for me, but I did the new practice orders, but I had to be very careful because it's so tempting to order a million different things. I do think it took me like a solid year to really figure out like what I use, and I use certain things and I'm going to continue to use certain things. So just have to be strategic, but normally I keep pretty low inventory, and I have some colleagues where if there's a medication I really don't use often, I try to not keep it on my shelf and go pick it up from them and then swap it out. That has been a really good strategy. But yeah, it's just like the things that I don't use often, I just have to really watch those dates because they will expire. Dealing like thinking about things like Ventipulmin or having albuterol. And so those were things in the beginning that I got, and I was like, I really do not need to have this. I just need to have someone that has these. So yeah, it's a bit of a learning curve, but I really try to be as tight as I can and not have a whole lot. So yeah, I don't know what if anyone else has other ideas on that. I'm jealous that Jenna can cycle her meds through her regular practice. That's brilliant.
I do
I do it a
think,
ton.
like you were saying, I think there's kind of a learning curve to inventory. And with us, we do have like one practitioner, would like this on the truck, and then another practitioner would like this on the truck. And, as long as it's kind of reasonable and I know they're going to use it, I don't care. But other times I'm like, no, we can just
No.
bum that from someone else. No.
Totally. The other thing I will say, because shipping costs are such a thing in this day and age, I like when I started the practice, I connected with multiple reps, and it was like, who is going to give me free shipping for these small orders that I have to place? And I found one. So you need to just harass your reps until you get what you want. That's my advice.
I love that. All right. Does anyone have anything else to add from inventory standpoint? Cool. So we're going to start talking a little bit more about work-life balance, and sustainability. Um, Megan, you chose emergency only work early in your career to create a better balance while raising your children. Now that you're teaching and providing ER relief, at Tennessee, I think is UTCVM. It's a lot of letters. How has your perspective on balance and sustainability evolved?
Yeah, I went into emergency only work out of necessity and just looking for a way to keep practicing without being on the road for 60 plus hours a week and missing all the little special moments that come with life outside of equine practice. And at the time, it really felt like a compromise. But what I didn't realize was that it would be like the most sustainable part of my career. And I mean, I always loved emergency medicine anyway. Um, But now that I'm working at UT, like in an academics setting and providing after hours relief, my perspective has shifted even further. Like I see students who are super excited about equine medicine, but they're also sort of terrified about the lifestyle that they think comes with it. And so um, I see local practitioners who are exhausted, and not because they don't love the work, but because of the structure of traditional practice, and it just hasn't kept up with those demands. And so I think what's changed for me is understanding that sustainability isn't just about my own balance anymore. It's kind of about modeling a different way forward for the next generation. And emergency only practice isn't a workaround or a stopgap. It's a legitimate career path, and it can support families. It can reduce burnout, and it, like James said, can keep more vets in the profession. So my perspective has kind of evolved from how do I make this work for my life to more how do we make this work for the profession? And honestly, seeing students light up when they realize there are more options than the old 24/7 model, that really gives me a lot of hope. And I think they see my energy when it comes to being on call. It's not a dreaded burden, like it's an exciting adventure. And so I think that also gives them a nice perspective of kind of what that looks like. And I think, work-life balance is kind of a term I don't really use. It's kind of more, work-life integration. There certainly were times that I would load up one of my boys and we would go see a colic and then, detour for ice cream afterwards, and sort of integrating life kind of into that and being able to do that even through emergency work as well. And so I think finding a path forward is kind of the way I see it. Certainly, Jenna, you've been a really strong advocate for improving retention and quality of life in equine practice. What personal experiences kind of most shaped you and your passion in creating kind of this network of healthier work environments?
I love this question. And so my daytime practice is just like the most amazing practice ever. I work with 3 other vets and it's the most wonderful work group and work experience ever. And so when I attended the AAEP lead seminar years ago, I thought about what did I like best? And for me, it was working with my amazing team. And I cannot unfortunately give everyone such an amazing group of colleagues to work with. So then I thought, what else could I do to help contribute to people's sustainability? Because truly for me, it has been finding like such a great practice home. And that's what's made all the difference for me in my career. And so again, I can't do that. So what can I do? Well, maybe I can help with the after hours emergency practice issue. And so that's where the idea for Trillium Equine came from.
That's awesome. Anybody else want to add kind of work-life balance type comments or integration?
Well, I think for some of our subscribing veterinarians, we get my favorite was I got a picture of the beach from one of my subscribing veterinarians, and it just said thank you. And she had owned a practice for, I guess she'd been about 10, 12 years. And her husband and kids had not been able to go on a beach vacation. That was, you really do improve the work-life balance of those people as well. Now, the trick is to make sure that our emergency vets don't get burned out. And so that's why you have to find the one that fits, your lifestyle, your desired lifestyle.
Right.
Yeah, I do think it does take kind of a certain type of practitioner personality, whatever you want to say, to do kind of emergency only work. I think that it's definitely not for everyone, because you do have to be a little bit more flexible and adaptable. But I think it's a great I mean I love it. And I'm glad that, it's becoming a little bit more kind of a good viable way to practice.
On the topic of like sustainability and kind of communication and preventing burnout, I have this thing about phones and in practice, prior to starting my practice, I had like a second line through my phone, and I had previously worked at another practice where we had separate phones, and so I went back to having two phones, and I love it. It's not for everyone, but I love it, and I have an auto reply. So if someone contacts me, like if they're confused about what's happening, which is uncommon, I have an auto reply telling them to contact their regular veterinarian. And it also says, if you're a subscribing veterinarian, feel free to call my personal phone. So I like that it allows me to have time away. So anyway.
Yeah, I don't have two phones, but we have a call service. It's an app called Ring Central, so you can log in and log out. And so I have terrible boundaries, but I try to log out most of the time. So then at least from a work perspective, I am not bothered.
Hey, Katie, why don't you talk a little bit about, I know you've had like a lot of leadership roles, one even being the president of your veterinary medical association. How has that sort of maybe broadened your view or your perspective as it relates to kind of emergency only or just community collaboration or whatever?
Yeah, so my work with the New Hampshire VMA was a great experience, and I was able to meet a lot of, colleagues in other facets of veterinary medicine, which was great and eye-opening and everything. There was the way that New Hampshire works, we were involved with a lot of legislative issues, which really opened my eye to a lot of things. Especially with the lack of knowledge of people in those government roles. So it was really cool to collaborate with small animal vets on issues such as a very hot topic, xylazine and whatnot. But overall, I just feel like there was some things like our Practice Act that we went to and questioned and kind of worked on revising that. And so that kind of taught me that, there's these traditional models and things are written, but you can always challenge what is out there and you don't have to follow the traditional path. And the topic I'm specifically talking about is it was written into our Practice Act about allowing lay dentists to float horses, and we challenged that, which it just kind of, we need to push the status quo and do different things. So kind of off topic, but also just emergency medicine is really challenging. In this facet is challenging the status quo. So that's the model of it. Anyway.
Yeah.
Anyone else have any leadership roles that have influenced this at all, and how it came to be?
I'm currently the Kentucky VMA president, and I put that off a couple of years so that I could get the emergency practice up and running, to make sure that we had that going, because there was no way. Did you do the VMA president while you were doing this? Because there's no way I could do it.
I did for part of it, but it was up and going. So once I had it started, it's easy. But yeah.
Allison, what about you kind of touched on this briefly where you kind of stepped away from equine practice for a little bit and did some small animal stuff. It kind of tell us a little bit more about what did that teach you and kind of what you wanted things to look like in your career.
Yeah, so I will say I always kind of dabbled in small. I did my equine internship, went to an equine exclusive practice, and then I actually went to a mixed animal practice, eluded me for a minute, and tried to do as much equine work as I could, but also saw small animals. And then when I had originally started my own general practice in where I was, I panicked and got a part-time small animal job because I didn't know how I was going to make everything from a financial standpoint work. But there hadn't been a time when I just did small animal, and found out that was definitely not for me. Do not like being confined to four walls for from like 8 to 5. And so I think from an emergency standpoint, it kind of allowed me, to be like focus on the human animal bond, um, more so than I feel like I could from a general practitioner standpoint. And I know that sounds a little silly, because, we are so used to being there for our clients all the time. But I think from an emergency standpoint, like you really need to, kind of step up and be there for the client. And, you know, also, we've talked about trust and everything. I think having just an emergency practice, and usually, knock on wood, I'm not going from emergency to emergency to emergency to emergency. So it actually allows me to spend more time at that emergency, hang out and, make sure a colic stays comfortable or, chat about whatever, while I'm suturing up a laceration or something, and it's not that, okay, I need to finish this up, get out of here and get back to my day. So I think it really allows me, personally to connect with clients on a deeper level, than I was when I was in general practice. And I think I really like that. And just yeah, being able to kind of connect to people and their horses, kind of in a forced situation, I found I really enjoy.
I also had about 2 months where I stepped into a small animal practice when I was ginormous pregnant with my first child. And it didn't take me till the end of the first day to know that this is definitely not for me. I need some windshield time,
Mhm.
and I'll take hooves over cats any
Oh
day.
yeah. Yeah.
So I kind of lived that as well. I want to be respectful. It's 9:30. Would each of you, are there any questions, Karen, that we need to know about kind of in the Q&A, or anything that we should maybe touch on? I think Jenna has been kind of manning those like crazy. It's amazing. Is there anything that we should kind of highlight?
We did have one question that I think is kind of just a general one. How can an equine practitioner find emergency services in their area? We don't really have any sort of clearinghouse for those, do we?
No, I mean, AAP's website does have, a list of veterinarians, and it can list by emergency, but otherwise, I don't know, not the one that I'm aware of, other than AAP's website. And as a veterinarian providing emergency service, you would have to go on and kind of list yourself there. Is anybody else aware of anything?
No, but what about just connecting with practitioners in the area and just reaching out, um, just to try to start that conversation? Or even if there's not an emergency vet, talk about forming a co-op or something. Sometimes that initial conversation can seem daunting or intimidating, but you will unlikely regret it.
And I'll put a plug in for your state VMA, or in Kentucky we have the Kentucky Equine Practitioners Group. Those networking groups are phenomenal for finding who is available to provide those services and that kind of thing. It's excellent networking in your more local areas. It's hard. It'll be hard for AAEP to provide that on a national scale, but local groups, and just like Katie said, go talk to your colleagues around the corner, and see who they're using.
Yeah, that was kind of my favorite part of like setting up equine coverage in different areas, was just getting to meet those veterinarians. Like, let me take you to lunch one day and kind of see how it could fit into that area or whatever. And so I think that's a great way to start and find out, what do you guys do for emergencies? What would it look like if we work together? And I mean, if there's not an emergency only practice in your area, which there aren't many of those, then the cooperatives have worked really well for a lot of people, and that's a great place to start. And then if a cooperative gets busy enough, maybe they justify, having a designated emergency only person kind of in the future. Are there any other questions? Anybody?
Well, only the one that would take another 5 hours to answer, and that is the feeling that we always need to be available is so hard. Why does that burden have to fall on the vets?
Hmm.
I think some of you have overcome that feeling.
Well, I think for me, I feel like that's probably something worth talking about with other practitioners to figure out, why do you carry that burden? Is it not being able to trust somebody else? Is it even control of wanting to have control of that case? What does that look like? Maybe you're in an area that is very isolated from other practitioners that would give you some relief in that field. But yeah, I think too, Ali kind of touched on just that on-call feeling, and some people are better about that on-call feeling than others. And, what does it look like for you to be able to go for a run while you're on call? Maybe you're that person that just clutches their phone the whole time, and, they're not able to turn it off. And so, for some people, that's a little bit easier than others. But then still having that really high expectation to provide really good, not just horse care, but client care too, because I want to take care of that person that's associated with that horse as well. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I think, I mean, even as a ER vet, like I still, something happens, like, I always probably overthink things or, doubt myself or something like that. But I also, again, kind of shifting over to kind of the personality of, having to be on call a good portion of the time. I do tell other vets and, like if someone calls and they need a vet in like 10 minutes and the horse is going to die, like there's no way I can get there in 10 minutes and the horse is going to die anyway, which I know sounds terrible, but I think we need to kind of give ourselves some grace too, that we're all doing the best that we can. And we just need to be supportive of each other. And if you are like in a area where there's, not a lot of support or anything like that, you can always reach out to people, like us, happy to text or walk you through something or whatever. But I think, yeah, just giving grace and having grace for yourself, I think is really important. And just knowing that we're human, we're not perfect, and that's okay.
I don't know. I thought you were pretty perfect tonight. This was great. I agree. We could do a whole nother one of these. There were so many good questions from our attendees. Thank you so much, everybody. And of course, to our panelists, thank you a million times over for your excellent comments and responses and explanations. I put my email address in the chat. You can send your questions to me and I will forward them on for about the next week. I don't keep my panelists on the hook forever, but if there are questions you need answered, and I see that a couple of our panelists are also putting their emails in there. Y'all are so generous with your time. Thank you so much. Thank you, of course, to American Regent Animal Health, the sponsor of all our virtual Wednesday roundtables, and to Dr. Howland Mansfield for speaking with us a little bit this morning. Not morning. It feels like morning. It's been a long day. This afternoon, evening. Anyway, thank you so much. This was just great. Now, if you go to look for this on demand, I will not only put the video on demand, but I will also put links to all the references that went through the chat. We had a bunch of papers and other information, so I'll get those to you as well. And I'll try my best to convince Zoom to give me the transcripts from the Q&A, and I will post those as well, so that those questions that were typed answers, everybody can see. Okay, cool. All right. So with that, I will ask our panelists to do one more wave goodbye, and then I will very awkwardly and rudely just hang up on everybody, because that's what I have to do. Thank you for your hearts coming across the emojis. We always appreciate those. Okay, so have a good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us, and we will see you next time. Good night.